for putting up with our lack of action to this point. It actually has a purpose. Third item on our table right now, and we're going to do this piece, and then we're going to take a short break. Stevie Greyhouse, if you don't mind coming forward, thank you for being patient. So out of the small area joint plan committee meetings, there was conversations about the impact of a plan to plan with the mapping conversation. It's something that we've reiterated many times. There's been conversation at small area plans as to what is the future of small area planning and how it might relate to today. So I've asked if we could keep a short conversation on this and not get into the deeper presentations we're used to from staff. I'd rather that be about Q&A time. But if staff could give us a quick 2-minute debrief, and then we can get detailed after that.
Switching podiums very quickly, and I'm going to give hopefully a very quick presentation when it's up here on your screen. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Stevie Greathouse of the Planning and Zoning Department. So we have distributed a memo and attachments that provide more detailed recommendations and information as backup to this. This is going to be kind of a 2-minute talk about one of the points that was referenced in that material. Planning and Zoning Department is currently in the process of developing a process for selecting and developing future small area plans. Small area plans, as you all know, are area-specific attachments to Imagine Austin, which provide policies guiding development of a particular geographic area. These plans help to implement citywide policies, such as the housing targets of the Strategic Housing Blueprint at a local scale. In the future, we are proposing to provide a spectrum of planning services, which includes Imagine Austin Center and Corridors plans, complete community plans, and other special area plans and studies. Imagine Austin Centers and Corridor plans would be full-service plans, which would include a character-based future land use map, as well as the opportunity to modify the zoning map within a designated Imagine Austin Center or along a particular corridor. The map on this slide indicates all designated Imagine Austin Centers and Corridors in yellow, shows the location of 2016 mobility bond investment areas with blue dotted lines, and also provides the location of draft Project Connect high capacity transit corridors in red. Based on a preliminary analysis of this information and other data, we've identified 2 potential green lines that you can see on North Lamar and kind of South Pleasant Valley area, where we would be proposing pilot testing new small area planning process beginning in year 1, with year 1 hopefully being after conclusion of CodeNext during fiscal year 2019. We anticipate that we would need to complete somewhere in the vicinity of 50, possibly even as many as 100 plans in order to adequately plan for all Imagine Austin Centers and Corridors. But we won't know that for sure until we're able to do additional analysis to figure out which centers and corridors have the entitlements that they need to achieve our goals and which would benefit from additional small area planning. Even with a more efficient process and additional staffing, completion of these plans will take time. We need time to engage the public, our commissions, and the City Council is the primary place where those planning processes take time. We anticipate that each plan would take anywhere from 12 to 18 months to complete, and under anticipated staffing levels after the completion of CodeNext, based on the kind of existing resources that we have, we would expect to be able to complete around 2 small area plans per year. Even with additional resources, it could take up to 25 years to develop all of the centers and corridor plans that would be needed. As many of you have pointed out, we're experiencing an affordability crisis now, not 25 years from now. So while these full-service small area plans are absolutely needed in order to realize the Imagine Austin vision, we probably do not have the luxury of waiting for those plans to come online before mapping the new code. And with that, I will close and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so that briefing is in tune with the requests that I've made of staff several times in the last few months that before we got to the mapping conversation, we needed to hear from staff. What is their capacity? What is their plan to address new, old, current needs for all of our planning areas in Austin, and how does that impact timeline of decision making? And does that mean we need to provide direction with our mapping to council so that certain things may happen to support that direction or support that mapping? So that's where we're at today. That may or may not be what you thought you were going to get at this moment in time in order to make mapping decisions. I have my own opinions of it, but I'm just going to let everybody ask a question or two out of our normal structure, because this is more about a briefing, we're not trying to take up a motion at this time. So all I can say is I'm frustrated by our inability to get to where we need to go with the traditional planning method, but I think we've all known that the traditional planning method wasn't getting us to where we needed to go quickly. And over the last couple of years, we've heard of a more efficient, a different process to get there. And I've asked for if we're buying a house, what's our budget? What are we trying to buy? Is this a $300,000 house, $400,000 house? I don't need to know, or a $100,000 house. I don't need to hear, I want a kitchen and a bath and all that. At some point in time, it's what can you afford? And right now, I'm hearing we can only afford certain things. And so what do we need to do about that? And it scares me to think that in this, there is no revisiting old plans, which means every time there is a plan, it is set in stone. Sort of. Until it's a zoning case that comes back to us. And then we get to fight it out in a different way. So these are all just things I think are hard when you know that there's limited resources, but there's very specific things that have to be done. So with that, let's just questions around the table. Commissioner McGraw.
I think it makes sense, and looking at quarters makes sense, but again, just like the chairman said, revisiting old plans, because what we've been seeing is there's so much activity in East Austin that it seems like we're just presented with those piecemeal changes, and I think there needs to be some effort toward the displacement issues and all the issues that are being talked about. So how does that factor into, since it sounds like we are not going to do more planning than we've been doing under neighborhood planning. I don't think I'm seeing any more capacity to plan. But how do those kind of issues get fed into, I guess, the criteria for deciding?
Sure. I think the kind of larger proposal that I obviously didn't have time to go into in the 2-minute briefing that I just provided you with calls for 3 major types of planning service, which would include not only the Imagine Austin Centers and corridor plans, but also what we're terming complete communities plans, which would be a more streamlined planning process that could go into a particular area. That area could be off of it, wouldn't necessarily have to be adjacent to a center and corridor, attack a particular problem, issue, goal for that area, could have some limited changes to land use and zoning, but wouldn't necessarily be kind of the full service, full-blown 18-month planning process. So that is one way for areas that are encountering specific issues that need to be addressed. In addition, that spectrum of planning services includes special plans and studies that would include citywide planning work. I think there is additional work that we could do as a city attacking issues on a citywide basis, similar to the work that we've done with some of our citywide code amendment processes in the past, where you would be able to take an issue that is happening on a particular issue that's happening citywide and address that at once across the entire city, rather than waiting for individual small area plans to address it.
So just quickly, does the recommendation for what direction to go, does it start with the Planning Commission, or does it just simply lie with the council?
It's a combination. Council initiates any planning effort that we move forward with. It's going to be adopting a small area plan that would be an attachment to Imagine Austin. We traditionally and will continue to ask for City Council to actually take action to initiate those major planning initiatives. It will, within our workload and the resources that we have, we obviously can take on smaller planning initiatives without necessarily having that direction to take those on. but it will be sort of a combination. I think we're envisioning a conversation amongst all of us. Particular elements of it will require council action. Anything that affects our budget requires council action. Anything that's going to require amendments to the code.
We could initiate our request, or
Yes, always can.
Absolutely.
okay.
All right, Commissioner Shea.
So I would like for us, the Planning Commission, to get a better understanding what you need from the Planning Commission. Like, what is the product to give to you and for small area planning to be able to bridge that crisis that you're talking about, right? You said we're in a housing crisis, but how can we get to that point? Because we're already seeing that small area planning. I mean, we can't do it in time, but what is your assumption? Like, right now, if we look at strategic housing blueprint, I mean, it was set it with a goal of 148,000 units, but then D3 is almost double that, right under 300,000 units. So if we handed D3 to you to go from there, did that help take care of that buffer so small area planning can continue, or are you assuming at strategic housing blueprint level? So I guess what I'm trying to find out is where's that beginning stage and what needs to be provided, because D3 is already giving twice the strategic housing blueprint, request number, which is double forecast. So what is best to be given to you? What can we do? Is there something we can help with, a future land use map of the city and a process to help mitigate some directives in these critical zones? And then at that point, then we created a process that can kind of go, while small area planning is continuing in different areas, we also have this other kind of a mitigating process to help take care of those issues. But so I want to know what that product is and what the expectations of capacity that's going to be given to you in order to help buffer. So we have a target as well.
So I think in terms of tools and products that could be given to the small area planning program to allow us to do the work to the fullest of our ability to do it, first would obviously be approving a new regulatory toolbox through CodeNext, mapping that toolbox in a way that at least addresses the minimums stated in the housing blueprint, if not beyond those, and then providing staff with additional policy guidance so that we, as we go out and work with particular areas to develop small area plans for those areas, we have strong policy guidance that's clearer than the policies within the Imagine Austin plan about metrics and targets and what we need to hit within particular geographic areas through the small area planning process to deliver back to this body a plan that folks will be comfortable knowing that it furthers the vision of Imagine Austin and moves us in the right direction. Okay. That policy framework could take a whole lot of different, I don't want to necessarily presuppose what that looks like. That could take different formats. Some places have done it in terms of housing accommodation targets, like how many housing units you'd want to have accommodated in a future land use map in a particular area. That may be one approach, but there may be other approaches as well. But the closer we can get to kind of measurable goals that send us out to do our planning processes with those goals in place, the better off we're going to be in terms of providing a product back that implements Imagine Austin.
Okay, and I think what I'm trying to understand here, because you mentioned the number to start with is strategic housing blueprint, and D3 is already twice that. Mm-hmm. So what if D3 gets proposed? You're already way ahead, but that doesn't mean it's in any triaged factor. So I don't know. I mean, that's where I think the planning comes in. But anyway,
my answer to that question, if I happen to be staff, would be like the process needs to be reverse engineered. Like we're starting from I feel like it's starting from the old model. We're still at 12 to 18 months for each of these plans, which it's assuming that certain tasks are being done in the same way I think that they've been done before, as opposed to saying in 5 years, if you wanted to get transition zones established, a certain amount of prioritized centers and corridors done. What do you start from there, and a FLUM. What are we going to do to get that? And then tackle the second 5 years, with maybe a different set of things that you're looking for as tools within that. Mm-hmm. And then say, well, okay, then what are the tasks we're going to do if we only have 2 people per 3 months to do each one of those in 5 teams or whatever? I don't know. Again, I don't want to assume the staff structure, but that's reverse engineering it and coming up with a program that those people can deliver, as opposed to saying, we're going to give you all these things just like we did before as part of your plan. Yeah? Kind of nodding.
I'm nodding.
Okay.
I'm processing.
Okay, thanks. Other questions for staff? Commissioner Kenny.
How much more complex does a corridor plan get, or is it already accounted for here? It just seems like a corridor plan for, say, North Lamar from downtown to Tech Ridge to accommodate, say, a planned high-capacity transit line that we want to put in there is a more complex thing than doing the Windsor Park University Hills neighborhood plan. So are these numbers reflective of highly complex corridor plans?
Yeah, the assumption is that we would be doing a plan that might include some urban design elements for particular aspects of that corridor, sites that are, good opportunities for doing additional detailed urban design work, might reflect partnerships with other departments and potentially consultant resources as well to be able to do market studies and that sort of thing in corridors where they're needed, and would also have some of the capital investment coordination work happening in that corridor. So we're definitely envisioning more complicated than just a land use map and a set of zoning designations as in terms of the products that would actually come out of that planning effort. There would be more than just that, and probably somewhat more complicated than some of our definitely the longer ago neighborhood plans that did not do any kind of urban design on a specific site or anything like that. Some of our more recent neighborhood plans have actually done that work. I know when we did the South Austin Combined Plan in the Civic Center area, we did actually bring architects in and develop some urban design schematics and visions for that location, but that plan didn't have any kind of detailed market analysis work or other.
It also had no zoning changes.
And it had no zoning changes.
Other than dealing with like the tools.
That's correct.
So if you're not talking about zoning changes to support the urban design component you're looking for, then you might not get the urban design.
We're definitely envisioning zoning changes as part of these planning efforts.
Because I imagine that with the ASMP coming up, that really like 5 highly complex corridor plans are really going to be the first ones on the list, most likely. Okay, thank you. And I just want to point out to Commissioner Shea, I think you might be mixing up capacity and yield a little bit. The strategic blueprint calls for 140,000 yield, and the capacity, which is supposed to be 2 or 3 times yield, it was 3 times on an earlier deck, and then they changed it to 2 times. It was for 300,000. So if you optimistically assume twice yield as capacity, then D3 puts us only exactly where we need to be right now.
All right, Commissioner Anderson.
Hi, thanks for being here. This is really, really great stuff. And while a lot of us would have liked to have this a while ago, I understand it takes time to get things together, and maybe you guys are discovering some things as we go. So, knowing that we can't small area plan our way into getting our housing needs met fast enough, I guess I'm thinking through a lot of what my colleagues are saying, and I'm trying to come up with the right question here. So, I guess I'm trying to figure out how do we then best go about getting the housing where we need it. So not just, capacity, because so much of that capacity we know is PUDs and Robinson Ranch and places that they may build out. They may, build to a small fraction of what they're allowed to build. But when I look through the strategic housing blueprint, I see a couple of things. I see, looks like future units on the ground by 2040, roughly half of our units on the ground are multifamily in 2040. Just a much greater percentage. Tremendous amount of growth in multifamily, and then also when I read through how are we going to make achieve our affordability bonuses or our goals, a big part of it's going to come from expanding our density bonus programs. And whenever I talk to developers, I'm hearing that that location really matters for them. So they don't want to be on the outskirts. They don't want to be where a lot of people don't care about growth. They also don't want to be where people don't want to live. And so how do we find that right balance to get a tremendous amount of new missing middle and larger apartment complexes, buildings, condos, you name it, on the ground in the urban core where we can really take advantage of the most bonus program possible? So how do we go about mapping that way when time is not our friend?
Yeah, and I think you all in your deliberations on the CodeNext map have an amazing team from housing and elsewise that have been helping with the CodeNext process to try to figure out just that question or the answer to just that question.
Right.
And we will take whatever mantle is laid before us and continue working with the experts and our colleagues in housing to try to actually accomplish it. I hope that our small area plans will be refining a great work product that comes out of this process that gets us as far as it can through a citywide lens. And then we can really use those small area plans to kind of drive for excellence in particular locations.
Hopefully we're all clear on the fact that we can't kick this can down the road. So tough conversation.
Okay. Other questions for staff as part of this plan-to-plan debrief? Commissioner White?
So we've already had a chance to talk in our small area planning group, but in your presentation, there's just a couple of questions that I had. In your projected 1 to 2 plans a year with your current staffing, did that include the complete community plans? Or is that just the IA corridors and centers?
That would just be the IA corridors and centers plans.
So
The expectation with the complete communities plans is those would probably be, and it would kind of vary on a year-by-year basis depending on how much of those resources that Imagine Austin Centers and corridor plans are, but the complete communities plans would be a lower resource investment from staff.
do you have an
Imagine Austin
idea of
Center
what that
corridor
looks like
plan.
per year?
I don't. We need to even do the work to kind of prioritize what locations those would look like and what the boundaries look like. I think the notion that's in the recommendation is that for at least the first 2 to probably 5 years, we would be focused almost exclusively on Imagine Austin Centers and corridor plans because we know we have a lot of work to do in those areas. But as we get those kind of highest priority center and corridors plans completed, ideally, we would be able to shift some additional staff resource to doing additional kinds of planning.
Okay, and then you listed kind of the 3 things that you need. You need CodeNext, you need some mapping that achieves the minimum in the housing blueprint, then you need some policy guidance. Could that policy guidance from Planning Commission come in the form of a FLUM? Would that be helpful?
That absolutely could be policy guidance. That
So-
would help guide processes for sure.
So this is part question, part comment. This is my comment, and then you tell me if this sounds like it makes sense. I'm wondering if there's a path forward for this commission to be looking at the realities of the situation that you just sent us, that small area planning is not going to fix all of our problems, and that, but that there's still a lot of nuance and value that comes out of small area planning. Mm-hmm. So I guess, is there a balance to be struck between us mapping enough to get the density to get the units that we need to meet the strategic blueprint in combination with a FLUM that gives you kind of direction so that you still have room to do your small area planning? I guess the question would be, could we map out the opportunities for small area planning?
You could. I would respond that I think the future land use map actually provides better policy guidance to you all as you're deciding on individual parcel by parcel zoning change requests, which are also going to be kind of part of this puzzle of how we get there as individual property owners deciding to do things with their property. I'm not sure if having a future land use map in existence as we head into the small area planning process is as big of a need as it would be to making sure that you've got that guidance for the individual property owners that are going to come in post CodeNext to do things with their property. It would be useful, but it's not like a kind of deal breaker policy guidance that we absolutely have to be able to do small area plans.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's take a 15-minute break.